A second unannounced meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. New questions about contacts between Trump's presidential campaign and Russia. And looming over it all is the biggest question. What does Trump want from Russia? And what does Russia want from Trump? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. Questions about U.S. President Donald Trump's relationship with Russia surfaced almost as soon as he announced his presidential campaign and have never really gone away. As a businessman, Trump took the Miss Universe pageant to Russia in 2013 and tried unsuccessfully to build a Trump hotel in Moscow. As president, questions about his top aides and their ties to Russia have dogged his administration almost since the day he took office. Let's take a closer look at the relationship between Trump and Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin. 4 years ago, Trump said that he'd only met the Russian president once, but last year he denied having any relations with Russia and claimed he'd never met Putin. Last August, Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, resigned after information surfaced regarding his work for a pro-Russian lobby group in Ukraine. Attorney General Jeff Sessions and former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn have also stirred up controversy regarding their undisclosed meetings with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergey Kislyak. And Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has had several meetings with senior Russian officials, including the ambassador, a Kremlin-linked lawyer, and the CEO of a state-run Russian bank under U.S. sanctions. Let's bring in our guest now to talk more about this. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Mica Mossbacher, who was a Trump surrogate during last year's campaign. She's also a former finance co-chair of the Republican National Convention. In Moscow, we have Sergey Markov, who is the director of the Institute for Political Studies in Moscow and a former spokesman for the Kremlin. And also from Washington, Melanie Sloan, an attorney with expertise in government ethics and a former U.S. federal prosecutor. Good to have you all with us. So, Mica Mossbacher, regardless of how much stock you put in all of these stories and the validity of them, it can't be good for the administration, can it, for this constant drip of Russia ties and the effect that this is having on his job as president?
There is no doubt an unwelcome distraction in this ongoing Russia obsession with the media. I have to say it is being played out in the media court of law, and there is a lot of chatter. I think the nation looks forward to sworn testimony in terms of Paul Manafort and also Don Trump Jr. testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Donald Trump said in an interview with Sean Hannity that in retrospect, looking back, he should not have had that meeting with the Russian lawyer. I'm a veteran of 7 presidential campaigns. I would have told him, don't go into that meeting without vetting her. But his only crime is naivety, and he was probably guilty of curiosity. But Jonathan Turley, the GW scholar, said that this was certainly not treason, as the some of the London Telegraph headlines stated, and it's also apparently not a campaign violation because there was no value received and no information given in the meeting. So it's a nothing burger, as Reince Priebus likes to say. It certainly is distracting from the Trump agenda and all the great things that he has done so far in terms of fulfilling campaign promises, such as look at the stock market. It's had record highs over the past several months. He's added 220,000 jobs to the United States. He is in the process of looking at prototypes for the border wall and also talking about a tax plan that will provide relief to everyday working Americans. And I think that's truly what middle America is interested in. And I think they wish this Russia investigation would go away. By the way, Whitewater and the Monica Lewinsky investigation cost taxpayers $80 million, and it took months to come to a conclusion.
Well, you say that this is a media obsession and it's, in your words, a nothing burger, but none of it has so far proven to be untrue, has it?
Well, it certainly has. I mean, a meeting took place, but nothing happened. As Jay Sekulow said time and time again, there was nothing nefarious that happened in the meeting. Should he have taken the meeting? No. Do the optics look bad? Yes. But beyond that, they have proven absolutely nothing. And even James Comey, former FBI director, said that the president, there is no evidence that the president was involved in any collusion. It's all hearsay.
Sergey Markov, I want to ask you, Trump seems very transactional in his approach to international affairs at this point. This is, coming from the point of view of a businessman. But you have the sense as well that President Putin is perhaps more interested in long-term trends and areas of influence. Is that your view?
I think Russia and Vladimir Putin, as president of Russia, want to improve relationship with United States. We think now we have artificial Cold War between two countries, and this artificial Cold War has been started by United States establishment, but those bent in Washington, which is a threat to the international stability and order. And American people want to have not new artificial Cold War with Russia, but American people want to have normal relationship with Russia. And their political will tried to express Donald Trump. That's why Russia liked his rhetoric during the election campaign. But now we can see that United States establishment, Washington establishment, those bent of dangerous politician, they efficiently block Donald Trump foreign policy, doesn't allow him to do it. They also blocked his domestic politics and their plan to impeach Donald Trump. We don't know who will win, either dirty Washington establishment or this uncertain Donald Trump. But of course, as almost everybody in the world we does not like this dirty and bloody establishment of Washington, which is responsible for the cooperation with Jabhat al-Nusra and Kiev Bandera junta.
I want to ask you, though, Sergey Markov, about Russia's view of all of these stories in the U.S. Media. I mean, when Putin looks at how Trump has performed so far as U.S. president, for example, is he likely to be pleased?
I think Vladimir Putin tried to use any possibility for improving relationship with American President Donald Trump. But Vladimir Putin understands very well that Donald Trump not able to do what he promised to American people because he blocked by bent of Washington establishment. And we look at what's happening in United media with some of fear because it's very dangerous games, but also some of the, it's a little bit funny because they attack Donald Trump for having small talks with Russian president. But you know, the event, the dinner which Putin and Donald Trump attended exactly have been created for such small talks. And each leader during such dinner had small talks maybe with 5, 6, 7, 8, probably with 10 other leaders. It's exactly what this dinner had been organized by organizers of G20. And so, of course, it's a little bit funny what's happening in U.S. media, and it reflects the crisis of United States.
All right.
If United States establishment will impeach Donald Trump, it will mean that United States on the edge of falling from the top of the superpower. It reflects the weakness of United States.
We'll come back to some of that. We'll talk a little bit more about what happened at the G20 summit in a moment. But I want to turn to Melanie Sloan now, and I want to ask you, Melanie, as a legal scholar and a former prosecutor, these stories about the meetings with Russian officials and people from the Trump campaign, what are the ethical considerations here? Do they rise to the level of collusion?
Well, it's really far from a nothing burger, as the Trump administration may want people to believe. This has been a changing story with shifting explanations from day one. You have to remember that at the beginning, The Trump administration, Donald Trump himself and everyone associated with him said there were no meetings with Russians, none whatsoever. And then we've slowly found out in this drip that, oh yes, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions had meetings with the Russian ambassador. We find Paul Manafort, the campaign manager, had meetings. Donald Trump Jr. has given an ever-shifting explanation for his meeting. First, he denied meetings, and then when the New York Times confronted him that there was, in fact, a meeting, he said it was just about adoption, and that's all it was. And then he eventually said it was about the Magnitsky Act. And only then later, when it turned out that the New York Times actually had the emails showing that it was the Russian government offering information, negative information on Hillary Clinton, that's when Donald Trump Jr. said, I love it. And he wanted to have that meeting. And Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort joined him for that meeting. And even conservatives in the United States have started to see that this is a real problem. It's not only that there's an investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. There's also an investigation by the Senate Intelligence Committee and by the Senate Judiciary Committee. The House has also expressed some interest, although their investigations seem much more roiled in politics. So I think we're going to see a lot more about this. Today, we also learned that Deutsche Bank is also being investigated. Deutsche Bank has been involved in some potential money laundering of Russian money. And at the same time, Deutsche Bank was one of the largest funders of Donald Trump's real estate empire. So the special counsel is now looking into that as well. So this is a very tangled web, and we are far from finished. This is an ongoing investigation. And indeed, it looks like there may well have been collusion. And in the criminal world, we don't call it collusion, we call it conspiracy. And whether or not somebody actually was able to complete the conspiracy, whether this Donald Trump Jr. was able to obtain information about Hillary Clinton or not, the fact that he was trying to obtain information about Hillary Clinton, negative information that they could use in the campaign, that indeed could be a campaign finance violation. And by the way, we've also seen that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is in fact now under investigation for obstruction of justice, whether or not he fired James Comey in order to try and put a kibosh on this Russia investigation. So this is a very tangled web with many angles.
Mica Mossbacher, let me turn back to you on this, and I want to ask you about the Don Jr. emails, which emerged a few days ago, which clearly show that there were central figures in the Trump campaign that were informed of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the election. They also knew very clearly about the Russian desire to assist Trump, and they welcomed that. So even if you don't believe that this is collusion, as I know you do, and that you said that this is naivety, at the very least, it doesn't look like they made any effort to resist the Russian overtures, does it? That's a little bit more than naivety, isn't it?
I think you're looking at a businessman, not a politician, in Don Trump Jr., and you're also looking at a lean and mean campaign. I have to say, where were the lawyers? But there is, again, no evidence that there was any collusion. Was there curiosity? Was there interest in opposition research, which is business as usual in campaigning? It's a nasty business. So there was interest in hearing out this Russian lawyer, but again, no information was received and no contributions were received. It creates a PR problem for the White House. No doubt. I have to commend Don Trump Jr. for releasing those emails. If his lawyer felt he had something to hide, he would have released a redacted version of emails, such as what Hillary Clinton did in regard to those emails on her personal server in an unsecured location. I'd love to touch on for 1 second about the comments in regard to Russia-U.S. relations, because if you'll recall, Gorbachev sat down with President Bush in 1989, and they ended the Cold War and hammered out a strategic arms agreement to reduce weapons of mass destruction in the world. And that, to me, sets the precedence for the fact that Russia is a neighbor. Like any good neighbor, you build a fence. Therefore, we have sanctions because the U.S. does not endorse Russia's interference in Ukraine, for example, and even Secretary Tillerson came out strongly in March on those sanctions. But if you look at it economically, there's $90 billion of foreign direct investment in Russia, including U.S., China, Germany, and the U.K. And you look at how we're intertwined economically, and in addition, what we do have in common are concerns about nuclear weapons in North Korea and also in Iran. Additionally, look at the agreement that Trump hammered out with President Putin on July 9th to cease fire in Syria. So I think we have more in common than we have.
But that was one of many ceasefires that came and gone, and we're still seeing conflict in Syria.
But but that was under Obama. This is the first time we've had this significant ceasefire in the Trump administration, and it was the first time he sat down with a meeting. So I think it's important. Trump has only been in office since January. I think he's making significant progress in terms of America working with our allies. He said America first, but not America alone.
All right, we'll come back to some of that in a moment, but I want to turn back to Sergey Markov then about these accusations of Russian attempts to interfere in the U.S. election. I know the Russian government has denied that, but these emails do show that there were key figures representing the Russian government that met with Trump campaign people and expressed their clear desire to give them information that would help Trump win. What do you say to that?
I think that part of the job of Russian officials to meet with representatives of different campaign of different candidates for presidency of United States. It's their job, the job of diplomat to meet with politicians of the country where they are working. It's absolutely normal.
But Sergey Markov, they did more than just meet with them. They talked about the possibility of giving them compromising information on Hillary Clinton, Trump's opponent. And it's no secret that President Putin is not a big fan of Hillary Clinton.
As I mentioned, first, it's normal to meet. Secondly, of course, where Russia didn't like Hillary Clinton, and Russian media and another politician distributed and supported information which show the awful profile of Hillary Clinton, who had connection with Saudi Arabia, strange money, which getting illegally millions, probably billions of the dollars from Saudi Arabia. It looks very strange, and of course, we want everybody know how dangerous Hillary Clinton is, who also threatened to support more and more terroristic group, for example, regime in Kyiv. But same time, we don't have any reason to make our beat on the Donald Trump, because very simple reason. Everybody can think himself. We already saw George Bush Jr., who want to improve relations with Russia and come to the better relationship. We could see Barack Obama, who wanted to improve relationship and come to the better relationship with Russia again. And now we have Donald Trump, who also want to improve relations.
Melanie.
Probably he also will lead to the better relationship with Russia. Why we should make stake on him? No reason.
Melanie Sloan, is this all much ado about nothing? I mean, are these, as Trump supporters have said, attempts by a hostile U.S. media to try and continue to put out negative stories about Trump? How do you respond to that?
Frankly, that's just ridiculous. It is not just like liberal media. You're even seeing columnists, like very conservative columnist Charles Krauthammer, now talking about the problems here. You're seeing many conservative members of Congress showing pause and being concerned and saying there does need to be an investigation, such as the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr. And Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. So this is a very serious matter. And Robert Mueller, the special counsel investigating it, is a very serious person, a former director of the FBI. He's widely respected. He's probably one of the most well-regarded lawyers in Washington. And I think we need to wait and see how his investigation turns out. But the way this drip of information and an ever-changing story comes out with more and more Russia contacts revealed every day, that's the kind of thing that certainly gives all Americans pause.
But even Trump opponents have said that at this point there is no evidence of collusion. And from a legal standpoint, it may well be that no laws have been broken.
It is entirely possible, but at this point, it's still too soon to say. And we're talking about there's the collusion, but also remember there's also the obstruction of justice investigation into whether President Trump has tried to stop this investigation, including the investigation into Michael Flynn, which is what led to the firing of James Comey. So there's a lot still to come. I think this is going to be played out over many, many months, and I think the jury's out, frankly.
If he has a good relation, I mean, Donald Trump likes to talk about the fact that he has a good relationship with President Putin. Is that necessarily a bad thing, Melanie Sloan, particularly given that relations between the two countries are at a historic low at this point?
No, it's not a bad thing. And of course, we want to have a good relationship with Russia. But some of our other allies, we also would like to have a good relationship with. And as I understand it, at the G20, there was a lot of concern by other leaders about the amount of time that Mr. Trump was spending with Mr. Putin, given that we have many issues, say, with China. And he could have spent some of the time with China's premier. Could have spent more time with Angela Merkel from Germany. So I think there's a concern about whether Russia is being favored over all other countries, many of which are much closer allies to the United States than Russia is.
So, Mica Mossbacher, what about this criticism that's been made of the relationship between Presidents Trump and Putin that's seen as a little too cozy? There was this news of the second meeting between the two of them at the G20 dinner that we're only hearing about over the last couple of days. The questions about why we're hearing about that now. And the thing that angered many of the European representatives at that meeting, many of them representing countries like Germany, France, the United Kingdom, all steadfast allies of the United States, was just kind of, why is he spending so much time with Russia, a country that we haven't had good relations with at this point? What's going on there?
Well, first of all, that is one reason is we do need to reestablish good relationships. And again,
but my question is, what kind of a message does that send to the European allies?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the G20 dinner. They weren't alone. It was a large dinner. And from what I understand, Chancellor Merkel set Melania Trump next to Vladimir Putin. So that was sort of orchestrated by the hostess, if you will, the host country. Secondly, remember, again, we have much in common with Russia, including Germany. We have common interests, and the United States is the leader of the free world, and I feel strongly that Donald Trump is leading by example. Let's find what we have in common. Obviously, we don't approve of Ukraine. There are many areas of disagreement, but in major areas, especially economically, again, look at Germany, $1.8 billion invested since 2014, despite their sanctions in the EU. We have markets and economic
We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. We could certainly spend a lot more time talking about this, but unfortunately, we are out of time. Mica Mossbacher, Sergey Markov, and Melanie Sloan, thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And thank you, as always, for watching. Remember, if you missed any portion of this program, you can see it again anytime by visiting our website at Jazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hazem Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.